Welcome to Orensha Tech, and we are here in part 6 of our PowerShell series, where we're going to go over more commands and how to add them into PowerShell for you to use. So the main way that PowerShell adds commands is through a module, which is a collection of commands, and it could also have global variables or even PS providers. And many of the major systems have created their own modules to add into PowerShell to manage those systems, such as Azure, SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, and AWS. You can even create your own commands and modules and then import those into PowerShell or have others import those into PowerShell to use. You can add any command that someone else creates using the PowerShell structure. So let's look at one of the main tools that PowerShell has created to get new commands and look for new commands and modules. This is PowerShellGet, and this tool just gives you a collection of utilities to get commands from different repositories. Now, the main repository is the PowerShell Gallery, which is Microsoft's own repository of PowerShell commands and modules. Now, this is community contributed code, so it doesn't mean that everything there is vetted by Microsoft, so you should always be wary of what you're downloading and installing from PowerShell Gallery, despite it being Microsoft's certified location for modules. So let's take a look at one of these modules, the Azure module. We're going to install this using the install module command and then AZ for our module name. And after this installs, we can look at this module using the get module command with our module name and the list available switch. And we need to use that list available switch because we haven't imported the module yet. So we can see here, we have our module name and which PowerShell edition it works with. So this is going to be a command that you're going to want to be very familiar with, the install module. That's how you're going to add a whole collection of commands for you to use. Now let's look at the structure right above a module, which is a repository, which is a collection of modules, and the module is a collection of commands. So we can use the register PS repository command to add a new repository into PowerShell. Now, PowerShellGallery.com is set up by default, but you can always add your own internal repository using this command. Now, if we wanted to find modules, we can use the find module command. And we'll search the term JSON to see what we can find. So you can see here, by running the find module command, we got a whole list of different modules pertaining to JSON that may help us if we have some specific problem with JSON that we're trying to solve. So then if we wanted to install one of these, we just run the install module with the module name. Now let's run the help on install module so we can see the structure of this command. So we can see it takes a name. You can specify minimum version, maximum version, required version, repository, credential. So always remember to run help on any command where you want to learn more about it. It's a great tool to discover how to use something, and it's something you want to get very familiar with. And if you haven't yet, go back to our second PowerShell lesson in this series that goes over the help and how to use it. And the other command you're going to want to be familiar with is update module, which is how you update any of the modules that you're using to get the newest version that there is. So let's look at how PowerShell looks for modules. PowerShell has a set of locations on your computer that it looks for new modules or existing modules. For instance, if you run the help, these are the locations that it's searching the help files for to learn about commands. So one of our environment variables is the PS module path, which is going to give us all of those paths. So let's run that right now to see what those are. So we can see on my computer, these are the list of paths that PowerShell is looking for modules. One is in my documents folder. One is in the program files for both the PowerShell 7 version and the PowerShell 5 version. And then we have one more here in the Windows PowerShell folder of the program files. And then again, another one in the System32 folder. And then another folder here in our Visual Studio extensions folder. So a lot of different places that PowerShell is looking for modules. And some of the main reasons to use these paths are that PowerShell auto-discovers the modules that are contained in these folders. And running commandlets in these modules will automatically import the module into PowerShell without you having to do that. If you run help, it's going to look in these folders for the help files to return any of the commands or modules contained therein, which is great. You want to be able to run the help and discover whatever you can to be able to solve the problem you're facing. And if it wasn't in this path, you'd have to specify the import module with the full path to that module every time you ran PowerShell. So let's look at adding a PS module path to PowerShell. We'll run this command to add a new folder location. So then if we run this command that we ran before, we can see now we have this folder path in our PS module path variable to use. But this will disappear every time we close and reopen PowerShell. So if we wanted to keep it in there, we'd have to add it to our profile script, which is something we'll cover later on in this series. Okay, next let's look at noun prefixes and the way that we avoid conflicts when having different commands that are similar in nature. So as an example of this, Azure adds the AZ as a prefix to their nouns, and Google Cloud adds GC. So this is a way to make your commands unique to your module or set of commands. And again, this is to avoid a situation where you have two commands named getUser. So if you had two modules and both contain the getUser command, PowerShell is going to use the one that was loaded in last. So whatever module you loaded in last to PowerShell, it will use that getUser command. Now you could always specify which module you want by prefacing the command with the module name. So if we add the module name and a backslash and then our command, it will know exactly which one that we want to get. And if you wanted to, you could always run the prefix parameter when you import a module to specify a certain name that you want tagged on to your commands. So if you look at this, our module name for our module, and then prefix with my, this is going to add a my to all of the commands in that module so that you know that you're using that module's commands. Okay, next let's look at discovering commands and some of the ways that we can do that. Help is the best tool that you can use to help you learn about new commands and modules. And really, you're going to want to stick to help when facing problems and try to stay away from immediately going to Google to look for other people's solutions. Really, the help file is going to give you a command, how to use that command, how to pipe objects into that command, how to discover what objects that command produces to then pipe into other commands. It has it all within the help file, examples, everything. So always go to the help file first. It is your best friend when using PowerShell. And to demonstrate this, let's say that we want to initiate a web request. So we're going to search help web request, and we have our wildcards on either side so that it catches anything with web request in there. And it looks like we only have one command, which is why the help brought up this command without giving us a list. And it is invoke web request. So we can see here we have the invoke web request with all the parameters that can be used for that command. And if we wanted to look at which module that command is contained in, we can run this command here. Remember, GCM is get command, and then we'll run invoke web request. We're putting that in parentheses so that we are running that first, and then we're taking the output and getting the source member in that output. So we can see that the source is the PowerShell utility module. So let's use our get command with the module parameter, and we'll look up this module. So now we can see all the commands that are contained within the PowerShell utility module, which is a lot. So this is a great way to discover new commands that we may want to use in our scripts. So let's look at one of these. Let's look at the test JSON here. So if we run the help test JSON example, this is going to give us examples of how to run that command. Remember, Q is how to quit the help. And then if we look up test JSON full, this gives us the full help. And remember that spacebar goes through all of the pages here. So two very good switches to use with your help to get to all of the information that you could need to master that command. And then one last thing with help, if you're not really digging the help within the PowerShell, you can always use the online switch to pop out the help into the browser, and that is going to give you this format, which is just a little bit more user-friendly and readable. So another great option to get to the help and avoid going to Google on the first run of trying to figure out how to use a command. And that wraps up our PowerShell lesson on commands and how to add more into PowerShell. In our next lesson, we're going to go over objects, which is the core structure of data within PowerShell. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, and have a good day.